Goaltending is a fickle mistress, and we're going to talk about that today on Locked On Flames.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and I'm joined by my partner in crime, Nick Zararis. Nick, how are you today?
Like most of the internet wrestling community, I've been yelling into the void for the last 12 hours, but we're doing all right. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Honestly, I haven't been online today, so I'm kind of excited to see what's going on. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. If there's one thing we talk about on this show, it is goaltending and gaslighting, being delusional. I guess those three things we talk about. But we're going to talk about all of that today, basically. And I feel like now is the perfect time to do it because when you're listening to this, there's 4 games left. And tonight's the night. Tonight is like the true Game 7 against Winnipeg. So...
Yeah, I mean, you heard Daryl say it on Tuesday afternoon at Morning Skate. He said it. You saw how we've used Markstrom down the stretch here. The best, Sutter, in his opinion, said the best he played was when he played both games of that back-to-back, and they won both of those games.
Yeah.
You got to have your ace in a Game 7, and it's not so much about what you've done, it's about what you can do. And that is the tantalizing proposition of any goalie anytime they step onto the ice at any level of hockey. If you've ever been to the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, there's the specific exhibit about goaltending, and there's a quote on the wall above the door before you walk in, and where it says, "This is the only position in all of sports where perfection is the expectation." And we really do kind of lose sight of how ridiculous that kind of expectation is on this position. But generally speaking, yeah, the goalie in hockey and quarterback in football have the two most outsized influences on the outcome of a game for a team of any position in all of sports. There's nothing in basketball. Even in baseball, you can get away with bad pitching if you can hit. If you have a goalie who looks out of his depth, you're not winning that game. Same thing with quarterback in football. You see it. It happens every now and then where a goalie just loses it. And it happens to really good goalies too, where they just lose it and then they just never get it back. You think about some of the goalies who've gone through it. I mean, you think about Brodeur at the end with the Devils and then the Blues. You think about Brizgalov with the Flyers. You think about Bobrovsky at different stints in Columbus, now in Florida, where Bobrovsky has 2 Vezinas, but you wouldn't know it based on how the last 2 seasons have gone in Florida. It is the most fickle position in all of sports, and it's one that's really hard to translate from team to team because goaltending is so situationally dependent, and it's why it's basically impossible to predict goaltending. You can describe goaltending. That's what a lot of the stats we have now are good at doing. They're good at describing how a goaltender plays, but they're not particularly good at forecasting what's going to happen going forward because goaltending is so situationally dependent, because there are so many variables that go into a hockey game that there just aren't in other sports. It's why hockey is so random. It's why variance is the buzzword in the playoffs. You hear all the media people talking about, well, good luck, bad luck. That's just variance. You know, you're swinging outcomes, and sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. And goaltending, when the entire position can basically be reduced to you got lucky or not, it's really hard to say, well, these people are authoritatively good or not, unless you have an extended track record. That's the one caveat to that point is if you've got a 4 or 5 year period of elite performance, you get the benefit of the doubt if you have a couple stinkers here and there. But if you're a goalie who's more or less in that middle, like 12 to 20 range, which is where, a decent chunk of goaltenders will fall for most of their careers, it's hard that you are really going to be beholden to what's going on around you.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of the unfortunate fall of Markstrom this year, is that last year was such an outlier that people were still expecting that performance, and that high caliber goaltending. And when it didn't show up, the expectations kind of got more intense, and the pressure. There was a lot more criticism.
Yeah.
And I don't think Markstrom is someone that is on Twitter scrolling and, name searching for criticism. I think he is probably his own worst critic.
He beats himself up about it too. He
So
knows. That's the thing. Most of these guys, when they're not playing well, they know they're not playing well. They want to play well. No one wants to play poorly. It's the people who are abrasive, argumentative, and like rude about it. Those are the ones who kind of like deserve the ire. Who are like, bro, you're a grown adult. Why are you name searching? Come on now. And it's not like we're saying you're a bad person. We're saying, hey man, you need to play better. There's a difference. There's a difference. Yeah. So for the most part, these guys know. Markstrom knows more than once. He's said, I've been awful. I have been terrible. I need to be better. He knows. They know when they haven't played well.
Yeah. And if there's anyone on this team that's going to hold themselves accountable, it is the goaltending. It is both of Vladar and Markstrom. I think they're both very aware of their performance and where they're lacking. And sometimes there are just unfortunate bounces. And sometimes, we've been very lucky. Yes, this lineup has missed Chris Tanev in some ways, but they've also been very lucky where they haven't had his deflections that seem to be, just all the time. They're not really, but, goaltending's gotten lucky in that way. But I think the leash was short on Sunday against the Ducks for a reason. And it's because he's going to play this back-to-back.
I think that's part of it. And like we discussed on Tuesday's episode, just when you are in that do or die fight or flight scenario, you got to have the quick trigger. You got to be, all right, well, I got to have convictions. It's not working. We got to change something. We got to go down swinging. We got to do everything we possibly can to win this game. Because like Daryl said this morning, every game is a game on Tuesday morning. Every game is a game 7 at this point. If you go in there and you don't have your best effort or you don't adapt to what's going on, you're going to be done. You're going to be done. You need to win every game the rest of the way. And that should be your goal. Win every single game the rest of the way. And then you don't got to worry about, well, what happens if they get worried about the next game? Well, win this game. Yeah. And then you got to win every single game here. You got 4 to go. Realistically, you need 4 or 5 to have a chance. 4 is your floor. You lose 2 games, you're done. You lose 1 game to anybody other than Winnipeg, okay. But you need to beat Winnipeg to have a chance.
Absolutely. And
the guy on Winnipeg's not blinking. They have not been great he hasn't been great the last month or so, Connor Hellebuck. But in one of those do or die situations, that's one of the 5 guys that people are going to pick. I think he was 4th in the NHLPA. They always do the survey of who's the most talented, who's this. If you had a goalie for a game 7, I believe Hellebuck was 4th behind. I'd take him behind the 3 Russians. I would take one of Vasilevsky, Sorokin, or Shesterkin, and then Hellebuck would be the 4th, and Ottinger would probably be the 5th.
Yeah, no, and I think that, I think, was it last year or the year before that he had a really down year?
Yeah, last year, yeah. It's every other year with Hellebuck. It's every other year with him where he goes from just being pretty good to one of the 4 or 5 best goalies in the league. That's one of the interesting things, and we can talk about this at the end in the last segment, is he's having a great season, and he's probably not going to finish a Vezina finalist.
And that is just the wonderful world of hockey, and just, the luck and the variant and everything that goes into making hockey so special. But coming up next, we're going to talk more about goaltending as a whole, and then, of course, as a team. But before we do that, I don't think these goaltenders will be using Indeed, but I want to tell you about Indeed. It's important to find a good match when you're looking for jobs and when you are looking for candidates. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And it is very simple to do. You can find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. Something I love about Indeed is that I was able to do a virtual interview, and I didn't have to wait for a Zoom link or a Teams link or anything like that. It was just right there, and that made the anxiety of waiting a little easier. Indeed knows when you're trying to grow your business and you have to make every dollar count. That is why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/locked-on to start hiring. Right now, head on over to Indeed.com/locked-on to learn more and start hiring. Well, thanks everyone. I can't believe we're wrapping up this regular season, potentially our season, but holding out, being delusional. Just another day, really.
Hey man, you gotta be a little bit. Being a sports fan is not for the faint of heart. The people who stick through it, no matter how bad things get, no matter how ugly it is, those are there is no it's not more virtuous to put yourself through misery. It doesn't make winning better. I think that's something we all tell ourselves to feel better about when our teams aren't playing well, is that, well, it's going to feel so great when they finally do win. There's no guarantee that you ever do actually win, which is part of why that's a flawed premise. But getting back to the weirdest people on the ice, the goalies. Yes, every goalie is a little weird. They all have something off about them, whether it be the relationship with the post or how they interact with their teammates, their pregame rituals. Every goalie is just a little quirky in their own little way, and it's very fascinating to me. So one of the things that I found interesting, and if you could be so kind as to toggle on the first one in the slideshow. Yeah, this speaks to the point you made before about Markstrom having a career year last year versus this year. So the red line is the actual results. What goals are going in the net? The red line going up and down, up and down, up and down. And you can tell last year is the lowest point of any season of Jacob Markstrom's NHL career. That tells you that your eyes were not deceiving you. That was the single best season of Markstrom's career in terms of goals saving versus what he should be saving. The black line, which represents expected goals, are what a league average goaltender would be saving. So as you can see, the 2021-22 season is the low point. The 2022-23 season is the high point, meaning he has conceded a lot more goals than expected. I think last time I looked, he's about 6 goals over expectation he's conceded, which was 64th of all goalies who have played who've played at least 200 minutes in the NHL this season. Yeah, there are some goalies ahead of him who've only made a handful of starts, but that's just the default, but not great. If you are rolling with the 64th best goalie in the league any given night, and Vladar was 60th. So you're dealing with 2 below average goalies. You're dealing with 2 below league average goaltenders this season. And it's really been the missing part of the Flames equation this year. I mean, yes, we've bemoaned the lack of shooting talent. You've heard me say that ad nauseum. But the goaltending, if they had even league average goaltending, a lot of those 15 overtime losses, the 28 one-goal losses, even if you get, a fourth of those, if you get 3 or 4 more regulation wins versus overtime losses, that's the difference between making and missing the playoffs, is 1, 2, 3 saves over the course of an entire season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, we've seen that a lot this year, especially when you're just kind of like, okay, that's the game that's going to cost us. And down the road when you need these points.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying back in February, you were like, you can't win the Stanley Cup in February, but you can lose it.
Yeah.
And the Flames just have not met expectations. And this chart right here shows it. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, no, that it's one of the single most dramatic year-over-year differences in goaltending results. I can recall, and I went and looked and spent a lot of time. Like it's bigger than Bob's between his Vezina year and the season after that. It's bigger than one of Brizgalov's seasons in Philly versus the one after that. It's one of the biggest 1-year swings in goaltending in the stat tracking era, which goes to 2009. So that's about where we have goaltending, where we have data like that going back to. And this is one of the single biggest swings ever. And that should tell you that it's been unlucky. You do not get results that dramatically different without extreme variance changes. And yeah, weird things happen over the course of an entire bad season. You'd say, well, it's not bad luck, it's just a bad season. But I think the fact that it's been such a dramatic difference in results year to year tells you that, yeah, this is like the floor, like this is as bad as it could possibly be. But it also tells you that things went pretty bad around him to get to this point.
Yeah. It's not just like a one-off situation. Like,
correct.
Your goalie doesn't just fall apart. I mean, it can happen, but usually
not to this degree. Not to
to this severity. And it's not pretty. It's not like, I'm gonna put the graphic up again, but like if you look at that's ugly. That's an eyesore.
It's dramatic because at 5-on-5, the Flames play pretty good hockey in terms of what they give up and what they generate. They don't give up a lot of quality. They really don't, which tells you, and he knows it, he's given up some stinkers, and the stinkers are what kill you. The stinkers where you're in your own head and you let the first goal in and the game snowballs on you, kind of like what happened against Anaheim over the weekend, where he let the first shot in, I think the fourth or fifth shot in. It was 2-0. The coach said, all right, I got to get him out of there. I know he doesn't have it tonight. And that's really what it comes down to. A lot of these times is, can you find it in yourself to just bear down, put the results of the previous game, the previous shot out of your head? And you hear goalies talk about that all the time. It's, what can I do on this next play?
Yeah, and I think I do have to say, I don't want to give him too much credit, but because it does feel like the bare minimum, but for Sutter to pull Markstrom and to know to pull him, like, I know that like sounds dumb, like he's a coach, one of the greatest coaches of all time, he should know, but I feel like there have definitely been situations where he's just left them, either one of his goaltenders, to just like, it's like when you're a kid and your parents just like, yeah, we're going to let you make this bad decision and you're going to pay the consequences for it because there's no other way for you to learn. But
it's about feel.
At this point in Markstrom's career, I don't think that we really need to do that. But, good on
I think it's not so much like trying to prove a point or like make them learn a lesson. I think it's a couple things. Number one, I think it's trying to have a feel for the player's psyche, where if you have too quick of a hook, that discourages them, versus if you let them try and battle their way out of it. Some guys are more inclined to let them just make the mistake and they'll learn from it. Some guys benefit from, hey, let me just get him out of there. Let him reset and we'll go at this again tomorrow. It really depends person to person. And that's where having a feel as a coach is so important. You need to know your guy and how everybody on your team is, because all your guys are different. You can't do the one size fits all thing with players anymore, because every guy is so specialized now, where their entire life up to that point, because these sports are so specialized now, they've always been coached a way that's going to get the best out of them. So yeah, for a guy like Darryl, who's been, coaching since like JFK was president, it's a little different, where he's used to just my way or the highway. But these younger guys now, you need to know exactly what they need emotionally, what they need psychologically, professionally, to get the best out of them. So maybe for Markstrom that given day on Sunday against Anaheim, I got to get him out of there. We need him right for the games on Tuesday and Wednesday. If I let him take a shelling tonight, he's not going to be right for Tuesday and Wednesday. So maybe to your point, like, hey, it's a really good job of reading the situation, when there have been times where Darryl has not read the situation well this year.
No. I think Darryl Sutter is one of those people that just can't read the room sometimes, and that's okay. I mean, it happens to the best of us. And coming up next, we're just gonna wrap up the show with some more goalie talk. But before we do that, I do want to remind you all that the NBA playoffs are just around the corner, and it is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app, America's #1 sportsbook. Just because you get the no sweat first bet with bonus bets up to $1,000 back if your first bet doesn't hit. I mean, I hope your first bet hits, but at the same time, like, you do get something good to match it if it doesn't, a little consolation prize. All you have to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. I will not be placing any bets for the game tonight against Chicago, or I guess when we're recording tonight, or the game against Winnipeg, because I bet on Toffoli and to have the first goal, and then just an anytime goal, and I lost money. So we're just going to be fiscally responsible. Are you betting anything?
I was talking myself into doing the emotional hedge where you bet the opposite of the result you want. So no matter what, either the team you want to win wins, or you win some money for your sadness, which is something I typically encourage my friends to do if they want to throw $5 on something. If your team's playing, throw it on the other team. So either you won and you lost $5, or you won some money because your team lost. So no matter what, you're leaving there with something. To quote Denzel, you're leaving with something.
So don't miss the chance to get your consolation prize and your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to fanduel.com/lockedon. Again, that is fanduel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And thanks everyone for hanging out with us here on Locked On Flames. This has been quite the season, and it's not done. We're not dead yet. They're not dead yet. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Just Belmosto and Nick Zararis. They can't be done. They're not done.
Well, no, the math says they're not. They got a 1 in 5 chance. They got to win 4 of the last 5 games. They have to beat Winnipeg if you want the math to work. Otherwise, you're probably, even if you win the other 4 out of the 5, but you lose to Winnipeg, you probably can't make up that difference unless Winnipeg does you a favor and loses 3 of their last 5. Then you'd have a chance. But still, you want to take care of business. You want to be in a situation where you can control as much as you can. Of course, the Flames have fumbled more than one opportunity to control their own destiny at much easier junctures where, you had 15, 20 games to go in the season where all you needed was one of those games to go your way, 2 of those games, and you're right back in the mix. Yeah. But for all intents and purposes, as we sit now, it's not only in your hands. You need to play as well as you can, and you need stuff to go your way. That's why you got to take care of your own business sometimes. And the Flames didn't do that, and now they're kind of beholden a little bit to what the Jets do.
Yeah, no, and that's not a fun way to end your season, and to kind of being, just waiting on bated breath right now and just kind of like walking on eggshells because you couldn't take control of the season.
Correct.
And it's a long season.
Yeah. So one last thing to wrap up on with, if you could toggle over to the next page in the slides, because there's 2 things. So this is what the Flames look like with and without Jacob Markstrom. So without would be another goaltender or when the net is empty. And as you can see by these visuals, the Flames play better when Markstrom is not in the net. That means when either Vladar is in net or it's an empty net, they are conceding less defensively and they are generating more offense. And this is 2,500 minutes is a big sample size. 1,100 minutes is a big sample size. So it's not like this is early in the season, feeling it out process. This tells you that statistically the Flames play better in front of Vladar or when the net is empty. Net is empty, a little bit different situation, obviously, but for all intents and purposes, what makes this interesting is this is a recurring theme. Teams typically play better in front of their backup goalie in terms of the results at 5-on-5 because they know they need to do more to protect that goalie because that is the backup goalie. They don't play as often. They're not as good. If they were as good, they wouldn't be a backup goalie. So the numbers here tell you that because the Flames are in this situation where their goalie has been struggling a lot, They still haven't been able to tighten up enough around him or to generate more offense to make up for the goaltending deficiencies. And I just found this as an interesting subplot within all of the little things you're trying to understand goaltending, because like we said in the first segment, so many things go into explaining how good or bad your goaltending is. I thought it was very interesting that it's not just Markstrom. When Vladar is playing, they are typically better at 5-on-5 than when Markstrom is in net. And that speaks to the preparation, the mindset, the psychological aspect of it, because they know, oh, Vladar's in net, we gotta be better because he's not as good.
Yeah. And, I think that it was actually earlier this season. I had Brian Baston from on the Forecheck, the Nashville coverage on, and we talked about something very similar here, because I was like, you like the pretty graphs, show me some pretty graphs. And this is just, if you're not watching on YouTube right now, I highly suggest just skipping to
We'll
this.
clip it. Clip it. I will put both of these visuals on social so people who aren't inclined to go on YouTube can see this. But yeah, no, this is just another way to tell a story. These images, the heat maps are useful for understanding where chances are coming from on offense and defense. Blue means they're coming from that area less than average. Red means they're coming there more than average. That's all these heat maps mean. If they're red, that means it's happening there a lot. If they're blue, it means it's happening less.
Well, that is definitely something to examine and take into consideration as we move in to the final 4 games of the season. And as always, thank you everyone for hanging out with us here on Locked On Flames. Remember to subscribe to the show. We're here for you every single day, Monday through Friday, and you can find the show wherever you get your podcasts. I know I'm kind of notorious for jumping between the podcast app and Spotify, depending on my cell reception, but upstate New York things. But you can also find the show on YouTube as well, and make sure you're subscribed and following us on social media, LO_Flames pod, and our Twitter handles are our respective names. And hopefully the Flames win tonight.
Beat the Jets. Yeah, give us something fun to talk about, please.
Yeah, please. I cannot go into this new job that I have and explain that I'm miserable because a hockey team
in another time zone
country just got eliminated. I can't do that. That's so embarrassing. So
take care of your business. Respect Jess's time and emotions and mine. Respect our emotions.
Yeah, and you know what? Just have fun, but more importantly, win.